Hey everybody, my name's Susan Blum, as you all know, because you're on my Facebook page, and welcome to the first of what I hope will be many Facebook lunchtime chats that we're going to have on Tuesdays. I put this time aside every week because I'm really excited to be able to share information and to answer questions and to be available to just really have a dialogue about what's going on in the functional medicine world, what's going on in treating chronic illness, and of course today I want to talk about food, one of my absolute favorite topics, and I know most of you will agree with me that that's something that you're passionate about as well. But specifically about the role of food as medicine and food and the gut, specifically about the relationship between what you eat and your gut microbiome. You know, I'm in the middle of writing my second book. I'm finishing it up. Actually, my deadline is October 31st, so it's a little bit of crunch time. And I'm writing a book on arthritis. And I just finished this past weekend my chapter on food. And my goal in the chapter on, so the book is on arthritis, and it's all inflammatory arthritis, like rheumatoid arthritis, but it's also about osteoarthritis and really any kind of, any kind of food. And any kind of arthritis. And so I've been reviewing the literature and I finished writing the chapter. And it's really fascinating because there is so much information about studies about diet and how diet helps improve arthritis. But in reading all of that information, the fascinating thing is that a lot of people believe and are showing that the change that you feel from your change in diet might be acting partially, at least for a good part of it, through the change in your gut. So in other words, that the change in what you're going to eat, and we're going to talk about that today, and I'm going to answer questions, you improve your diet by eating more fruits and vegetables and more fiber. Your gut microbiome becomes more robust, starts making short-chain fatty acids, which really it treats leaky gut. It starts plugging up all the leakiness and the tight junctions in the gut. The short-chain fatty acids, it stabilizes your T cells and your lymphocytes and your whole immune system, and you feel better. And now, not to say there aren't all sorts of wonderful phytonutrients. There's all sorts of wonderful phytonutrients in food, including something called polyphenols and flavonoids and all these things, and antioxidants, and they all really help to repair the inflammation in your body. So it's really important for that reason as well. But the fascinating thing that I really learned, I mean, I knew this because I've been practicing functional medicine for 15 years, and I know the importance of food, and I see it in how I work with all my patients. But I really, in reviewing the literature, it was very satisfying to see that it's actually something that is proven, that there is really good evidence for how this works. And so I want to then move a little bit. What I wanted to share with you today is sort of what I also learned about reviewing all the different kinds of diets out there. Now, I would like to bring sanity back. I think it's time for us to have a more sane approach to food. There are so many different ways, my poor patients, they come, I mean, they're not I love all my patients, but people come in every day and they're so confused. And I get emails, and we have online programs, and people send in questions, and there's confusion. Should I do this diet? Should I do that diet? At the end of the day, there's some foundational principles that no matter what diet you're following, you have to follow them, because your gut flora especially, but your whole body needs certain nutrients that you can't just decide I'm only going to eat one food group and forget about the other one. So in reviewing the literature, what diets are the most effective for treating arthritis or inflammatory disease, but also it's cardiovascular disease, and other diets as well. And the diet that wins hands down across the board is the Mediterranean diet. Now, and I'm not saying we can argue about the pros and cons of other ones, but it was fascinating to me that the Mediterranean diet has such great data about why it's so, about its effectiveness in treating disease and using it as a basis for food as medicine. And what is good about the Mediterranean diet, if we just look at that as a basic for why we think it's good and take those take-home points with us. The first thing is well, what is the Mediterranean diet, right? It's eating a lot of vegetables, and which are rich in fiber. There are whole grains, which we could talk about whether you need to limit those or not, but it includes all fruits, vegetables, legumes, and it's about balance. So yes, you can have some lean meat sometimes, and there's minimum dairy, but you're allowed a little bit of cheese. But it's really a very much of a vegetable-based whole grain, and it's filled with olive oil and omega-3 fats. So it's rich in the good anti-inflammatory fats. It's low in saturated fat, and it allows a little olive oil, a little alcohol. Sorry. So what I found fascinating in study after study, when you put people on these restrictive diets, the question then becomes, okay, we do elimination diets in functional medicine, and I do them all the time, and I love them, and I still do them, and I still believe in that as a place to start. But at the end of the day, and this is the big question I'm bringing to my new book, how do we help people move along? Where do you go next? What is the lifestyle and the kind of food plan you're going to follow for the rest of your life? It's one thing to do a 6-week elimination diet or 3 months, or to do something really intense. And often we do that because it helps reboot and helps people feel better really quickly. And it helps remove gets you sort of off of the sugar and the processed foods and all of those foods. But where do you go next? Where do you land? 6 months, a year from now, 2 years from now, how should you eat? And so I've been busy sort of crafting this thing called a healthy eating plan. And it really, at the core of it, turns out, as I'm reading all the literature, it's really basically, at the base of it, a Mediterranean-based diet with following just some basic principles for quality, right? So you have to take a diet, and even if we go and talk about paleo, right? I'm not anti-paleo, but you have to talk about quality. You can't just eat any kind of, the old Atkins thing where you're eating any kind of animal products you want, like the bacon. I had a patient once who told me he was having a bacon cheeseburger without the bun for breakfast every morning. That's filled with inflammatory fat. That's not going to help you feel better. And so the old paleo, our ancestors really ate vegetables 80% of the time, and then they ate some lean meat, here and in there. It wasn't filled with processed food. So I think when you look at all the different diets, the common principles are, and this is what I want to leave, the message I want to leave you with today. The common principles for going forward into permanent good health and choosing a food as medicine plan that's going to support your gut microbiome, which we really haven't talked about yet. That's another whole big topic, but we all know that a leaky gut triggers autoimmune disease, food sensitivities, and so the goal then is to have really good, robust, healthy gut flora with good intestinal barrier, so with a really good intestinal barrier. And it turns out that food is the number one thing that influences whether you have a healthy gut lining and healthy bacteria in your gut. Number one. And the studies show that you change your diet from being a vegetarian over to being a carnivore or vice versa, within a few days the whole gut flora changes. Which is why short-term diets don't work. You have to eat that way consistently for the rest of, there has to be some basic guidelines you're going to do for the rest of your life in order to keep the flora in a good, robust state with good, friendly flora growing and fermenting the fiber in your diet into something called short-chain fatty acids, and that is what actually makes everything, that is actually, I'm just keeping track of the time because I'm going to talk for 15 minutes, and then I'm going to open it up to questions. So this is my first time, so you'll have to bear with me a little bit. So I think I'm still good with time until we hit that mark. But, so where was I? Gut microbiome. So the gut microbiome is going to ferment all the food you eat. And the studies that I reviewed for the past 2 weeks are fascinating because, for the fiber, for sure. But there's also something called polyphenols in the food, in fruits and vegetables, and in whole grains too. But polyphenols are, and there's a subcategory called flavonoids, which you might know are in onions and there's quercetin is a famous one, and there's all these phytonutrients in the food that also help the good bacteria grow and also help you make something called short-chain fatty acids, of which butyrate is the famous one that is, colon cancer preventive. But when you start looking at the research on short-chain fatty acids, they work throughout your whole body. Short-chain fatty acids don't just help treat leaky gut, feed the good bacteria, the health of your intestinal lining cells. They repair your immune. They influence the health of your T regulator cells and your immune system in your gut, as well as throughout your body. They actually go through your entire body. They have a body-wide effect, systemic. And so feeding those good bacteria that make those good short-chain fatty acids is the ultimate goal of your food plan. And so how do we do that? It turns out that the Mediterranean diet is filled with all that good stuff. It's filled with these phytonutrients called polyflavonols. It's filled with a lot of fiber. And it's really absent all that processed food and a lot of animal and saturated fat, which feeds the harmful bacteria, the other bacteria. So when you look at people on a paleo diet, like a very carnivorous paleo with a lot of animal, and you look at somebody and not eating a lot of vegetables, like I said, you could do paleo with a lot of vegetables too. Their gut flora is completely different, and they're making completely different levels of short-chain fatty acids. And therefore, when you look at something like rheumatoid arthritis or inflammatory disease, the diets, especially a low glycemic diet and the Mediterranean diet, were sort of the two big winners as I went through the research that I came out. And both of those ways of eating, and of course, quality, you have to look at quality. You can't just say any grains or any vegetables. Well, you could pretty much eat any vegetables, but you have to do quality of the fats and quality of the meat and quality of the carbohydrates. And you can, and then you take those plans and you can live that way. And that's one of the reasons why the Mediterranean diet is such a, and even just a low glycemic diet, which is really where you're taking out all the standard American food, all the sugar, all the processed food. There are ways that you can actually go forward and live. It's a way to live that you can live with. And I think that's really important. I have people I've been working with for years and years, and we need to help people find sanity, bring the sanity back. Now, I do have to add, as a functional medicine practitioner, I'm also do a lot of elimination diets with that. So I'm an autoimmune specialist. I wrote a book, The Immune System Recovery Plan, and so all my patients are gluten-free. All my autoimmune people are certainly gluten-free, and so I do a lot of elimination diets at the beginning, and most people end up on sort of a gluten and dairy-free version of the Mediterranean or some sort of a healthy, balanced food plan that they land in later. But the goal of an elimination diet at the beginning of starting any program is to identify if you have any food sensitivities. And the nice thing is, as you work to heal your gut, you can sometimes reintroduce those foods 6 months later or a year later, and you'll have no problem again once your gut is healed, because food sensitivities are often triggered, or most of the time triggered, by a leaky gut. So let's see, maybe I'll pause for a second. Where am I? All right, so I guess let me see what, anybody have any questions for me? Let's see. A rainbow of fruits and vegetables, and of course whole grains, right? So that was a great comment. So anybody have any questions? So somebody said something about juicing. So I actually do feel that there's a role for juicing. I sometimes think if the juicing's done correctly, in some ways my joke is always that juicing is like mainlining vitamins. The most important thing to keep in mind is that when you buy a juice over the counter, you want to make sure that it's organic, because you're concentrating all those pesticides as well as everything else in the juice, and if it's not. And you want to make sure the juice is organic, and you want to make sure that it's low in sugar. So one of my fun things that I'm involved in is I'm a co-founder of a company called Organic Farmer, actually, and it's a juice and healthy food company, and so I crafted with a really talented chef named Darlene Gross. She was my mixologist, and we made all these really cool juices and with function in them. But my strict guidelines to her were that they all had to be very, very low in sugar. Most of them are under 10 grams of sugar for a bottle. Some of them are more like 12, 13, but I was really very strict about that. But I think there is a role for juicing, and it depends on your goal. Some people use it for weight loss, some people use it for detox. But I think at the end of the day, you might jump in and out of juicing, but you still need to find a sane home base for you to live your life where you can know the foods that are going to be health supportive for you. And it's some way where you can have balance and find a way to live. And I usually, when when we're landing into the long-term plan, I usually move people to this sort of 90% rule, know your home base, live there most of the time. And then, and then you go out for dinner and you have a wedding and you do things like that and you can go off your wagon, but then come back on and you know what your home base is. Let's see. Yeah, autoimmune. I have a great patient, somebody, not my patient, but somebody calling in, answering in about, can I add quinoa? So she's on the autoimmune plan. So I have colleagues. So this is the thing. So I do want to make a mention of that. I love all my colleagues. I have, I have really good friends in the functional medicine world, and people, even in the autoimmune world, have, recommend very strict restrictive diets. I do that too at the beginning, especially to help things, sort of get under control. Some people, I'm a little less restrictive than some of my colleagues with the autoimmune diet. But again, I still have a version of that. And at the beginning, while you're not sure if you have any food sensitivities, because rheumatoid arthritis, somebody asked a question about rheumatoid arthritis. Rheumatoid arthritis, you have a leaky gut, which means that you have a lot of food sensitivities. And all those foods that have a lot of proteins, that are a lot of potential to trigger joint pain, let's just call it that. At the beginning, you want to clear out all the foods that you think that it could possibly be triggering pain. And it's a long list because your gut's so leaky. So at the beginning, it's really helpful. But at some point, especially if you've been healing your gut and following the food plan for a while now, 3 months, and you've been doing it, I believe you can test to see if any of those foods trigger symptoms or if they're problematic for you by reintroducing them one at a time to see if they trigger symptoms. You're not supposed to necessarily eliminate those foods forever, but you need to eliminate them until you know that you can tolerate them again. It's called an elimination challenge diet. So you follow it for a while, and then you start testing to see if you can tolerate those foods. As you heal your gut, you can start tolerating them, which is why if you're listening to this and you have multiple food sensitivities, you must heal your gut. And because this is such a foundational piece of every person that comes to Blum Center, and now it's not just me, I have 3 other doctors, and we're seeing hundreds and hundreds of patients every week, or every month. I don't even know the numbers, but we're seeing a lot of people. Healing the gut has become so foundational to what we do that I just created this amazing Heal My Gut program online, which you can find through me. Just blumhealthmd.com is the name of the website. But it's a coaching, guided, supported Heal My Gut program, and heal your gut. And as you work through healing your gut, you'll be able to reintroduce the food again later. And so, like I said, bring the sanity back. You can start with these restrictive diets at the beginning, but the ultimate goal is heal your gut, take the foods out, heal your gut, and then start slowly being able to eat some of them again. You might find there's 1 or 2 you're never going to really be able to eat, and that's more about the food maybe than your gut. But for the leaky gut people that have a lot of food sensitivities, it's about your gut. So that's where you got to go first. So that's just sort of my comment on people on very restrictive plans. So yes, test yourself for legumes again, and test yourself. Try different foods differently. So if you've been sensitive to nuts or you took nuts out, try a different kind of nuts. And sometimes seeds are great. Like I actually eat a lot of seeds. I eat pumpkin seeds and sunflower seeds. I don't eat as much nuts, as many nuts. And so just experiment to see which one is best for you. So one question, how do I know how much support I need for my gut microbiome? Well, that's a really good question. If you have an autoimmune condition of any kind, or you have arthritis, or you have inflammatory disease, or you have chronic pain and inflammation anywhere, you've got an issue with your gut. If you have digestive symptoms like gas and bloating, maybe I'll do that next week. We'll talk about SIBO and different kinds of gut problems. Small intestinal bacterial overgrowth is SIBO, and how we treat that. But the people with a lot of digestive symptoms, gas and bloating, chronic constipation, if you've taken a lot of antibiotics, if you have reflux, if you're taking PPIs, proton pump inhibitors, chances are your gut microbiome is out of whack. And that's just for you people with gut symptoms. I have a lot of people with autoimmune disease who do not have any gut symptoms, and I do a stool test and I find a lot of imbalance there. And so if you have any kind of those issues, definitely you can go to my website, blumhealthmd.com, and I have a whole questionnaire you can take to sort of determine in what shape your gut is in. And it will help you sort of direct you towards the best next step. So I do have sort of a questionnaire up there that you can use to gauge sort of how, where you think your gut's at. But if you have an autoimmune, like I said, if you have any of those things that I listed, you should go right to the 30-day Heal My Gut program. We actually, now in the office, somebody with arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, or even people with SIBO, I automatically do 2 months of gut herbs. And maybe next week that's what I'll talk about is SIBO, dysbiosis, that means imbalance in your gut microbiome, and specific treatment ways to treat it. What kind of herbs I use, how long I do the treatment, how to heal a leaky gut. That'll be fun. We can do that. This week I was doing diet, the food thing. It's in my head because I just finished writing the chapter, which was, gosh, for people, how doctors can stay up on things without doing all this reading, I don't know. But I have to say that writing books is just the greatest way to really dig in and get up on what the newest research is. And I was just so, sort of circling back, I was just so impressed with the role of food that when we help people feel better in functional medicine and you change people's diet and they feel better, sometimes it's the nutrients in the food, but it's also how it's changing the flora. And all the studies that are looking at how you change your flora, the different food groups, at the end of the day, you have to eat fruits and vegetables, fiber. The role of whole grains is between you and, but I think there's a place for whole grains in limited amounts, even for people who want to be carb restricted. The very, very low carb diets, the zero carbs, low fat, low carb diets are good for weight loss, but they're not good for your gut. And that's what the research shows. So long term, you have to have some whole grain in there, even if it's a little bit, and eat a plate full. It's like 80% vegetables on your plate, and then a little bit of whatever protein you choose. But at the end of the day, that's where you need to focus for long-term health. And then you sprinkle in, it's like the 90% rule of staying that way 90% of the time. Which seeds have the most protein, healthy fats? Oh, okay, I love that. Pumpkin seeds are one of my favorites. They have the highest amount of protein. And so pumpkin seeds are really good in protein and healthy fat. The other one I really love is sunflower seeds. I sprinkle that on I have a berry bowl every morning for breakfast, and I sprinkle on hemp seeds. Now hemp seeds, actually, when people say, how am I going to get protein, vegetarian protein, it turns out that 3 tablespoons of whole hemp seeds have 10 grams of fiber. So my summer breakfast, my berry bowl has been organic berries with some acai berry, sort of liquid, poured on top, 3 tablespoons of hemp seeds, which has 10 grams of protein and a really good omega fats, as well as a teaspoon of sunflower seeds, which is really high in zinc, which is vegetarians don't always get zinc. So nuts and seeds are filled with nutrients that are really great, and I think ratio-wise they have a lot more good protein for the amount of fat that they have in there. So somebody mentioned whole grain but never gluten. So one last thing about gluten. Let's see where we are on time. Yep, 5 more minutes. So let's talk about gluten for a second. I want to just talk about it in the context of the gut. So there's actually a great article recently this past year that came out called Non-Celiac Gluten Sensitivity. And it's from a whole group of researchers at Columbia University in the city. So it's from a really reputable place, right? When they reviewed all the literature and they did a study looking at people at the small intestines and did biopsies of people who did not have the markers for celiac disease. But they knew they were having symptoms. They had digestive symptoms, some had headache and joint pain and systemic symptoms from eating gluten. And so what the researchers found was gluten in those people, they saw that the gluten was damaging their gut, but in a different way. There was a lot of something called eosinophils, and gluten was damaging the protein in the tight junctions, which means that it was triggering a leaky gut. Therefore, it just highlights that we all know this, right? But it proved that you don't have to have celiac disease, which is you have something called tissue transglutaminase antibodies, you have endomycel antibodies, you have these anti-gluten antibodies, gliadin antibodies. You have to have special check marks of the box to get celiac disease. But it just proves that gluten is doing other things that we're now able to make check marks for, to really identify. And so I'm so happy that these guys at Columbia, this group at Columbia, published this, because it really shows that gluten is damaging the gut. So if you have leaky gut, or you think you have leaky gut, you cannot eat gluten. It has to come out of your diet. Now, let's be real. Do I ever eat gluten? Of course I do sometimes, but I don't 99% of the time. So every couple of weeks I go out to dinner and I have bread. But the rest of my life I don't. But I'm also way down the road in my healing. When I first started healing my gut and healing my Hashimoto's, my autoimmune disease, I didn't eat. I was strict for a very long time, probably a couple of years. But now I have like the 95% rule, and I can eat it sometimes. And now you can see why. It's because my gut's better. I don't have leaky gut anymore. And if I eat a lot of gluten all the time, daily, it's going to damage my gut again. But on rare occasions, I can. That's just for me. That's not a celiac person. That's me, who had pretty significant gluten sensitivity. I've treated it, so I'm much better, but gluten still has no role in a daily diet because it will damage your gut again. I hope that makes sense to people. I'm really about balance. I'm really about sanity. And if someone with celiac absolutely can't have gluten because they'll get very sick. But in the years to come, as you're working on healing yourself in a functional medicine way, you won't get as sick from most people. I can't say everybody. But there is a way to have more sanity and live your life 95% of the time, following all your guidelines, and then being able to have, you have your glass of wine on the weekends, or you have, you go out with friends and you have some goat cheese on your salad. You can't, that's the reality of where most people live. And so that's how I work with people. Okay, let's see anything else. What about oat bran? Is it okay for the gut? Oat bran actually, if it's gluten-free oats, and you're not sensitive to it. Now, it turns out that some people, oats and gluten have the same, in the phylogenetic tree, oat and gluten have the same grandparents. They're sort of second cousins, as opposed to rice, which has completely different grandparents and a completely different part of the genetic tree. So there is some, oats, some people really actually are sensitive to oats, regardless if they're gluten-free or not. So you have to make sure that you're okay with oats first, and you do that by removing it, not eating it for a couple of weeks, and then eating it again to see whether it triggers any digestive symptoms or systemic symptoms. And you must have gluten, and if they're gluten-free oat bran, it has a really good role in gut health. And so if you can tolerate, if it's okay for you, it's good for you. And that's actually the truth of a lot of these kind of grain foods, and a lot of these foods that are removed for autoimmune people. Once you reintroduce them, if they're okay for you, they're okay. Except for, like I said, gluten. And under certain circumstances, I still believe in dairy restriction, even if you find that dairy is okay for you. And maybe that'll be a conversation for another day. We'll do dairy. So let's see. What else? If you're exposed at all to gluten, you're still getting the toxin. I'm not sure what you mean by toxin, but if you're exposed at all to gluten, you're still getting all the proteins that are gluten, and if that's toxic to you, then yes, you are. But some people will get extremely sick. I mean, it sort of brings up the debate, does everybody need to be gluten-free forever? And is gluten just completely toxic for everybody no matter what? And I would say that it is a damaging food for the gut and should be eaten either not at all or in very minimal quantities by most people, especially if you have any kind of gut issue that you're working through and you're trying to heal your gut. So in a Heal My Gut program, there is no place for gluten. So let's just put that out there. I hope I haven't been confusing on the topic. Initially, especially if you have any health issues, Heal My Gut, no gluten. Okay, let's see. So Okay, it can cause levels that will cause decrease without taking a statin. So lowering cholesterol, that's sort of a different topic, but fiber is really good for lowering cholesterol, and people following a Mediterranean-based diet and a low glycemic, high fiber diet tend to have lower cholesterol. They eat healthier fats, and I always believe in using food first for treating cholesterol. All right, so it looks like our time is up. I hope everybody enjoyed our conversation, and you understand a little bit more about food and the importance of eating food with fiber, rich in phytonutrients, the polyphenols, all those colors, and the effect they have on your gut flora and for your ability to make short-chain fatty acids, and yeah, and to build that into the way you're going to live your life. Okay? Have a great week. I will see you all next week.